I am delighted to introduce tonight's speaker. Utah native Tyler Brinkerhoff received a bachelor's degree in history from Weber State University in 2019. Tyler has a passion for researching, especially family history, and has used that passion in his career as a historian. While completing his undergraduate degree, he worked as a museum assistant at Ogden, Utah's Union Station Museum. So he had some great experience, and lo and behold, he came here to volunteer, and we made sure he stayed. So his love for travel, adventure, and history brought him to Virginia to study at James Madison University. For the past 2 years, Tyler has been a teaching assistant at JMU and has worked as a museum assistant for Rocktown History. After he earns his master's degree in public history in like 2 weeks, he plans to continue his pursuit of history by pursuing employment in the field. And Tyler is supported by his wife, Katie. So we're so glad that you could join us this evening also.
I want to reach out and say a big thank you to Penny Imeson and the many volunteers who have helped here at Rocktown History with this project, as well as my thesis advisor, Dr. Whitmer, Dr. Borg, and Dr. Lanier, and my wife for her patience, and also the many others who have helped me with this project. Now that that's going forward, it was while I was researching here through these archives that I researched and found the potential that these records contained, and that prompted me to think about the possibilities of what the information contained in these records had, and that they might not yield not only to the local community, but also to the larger community as well. And so being a community archive, the collections here have been growing and evolving over time, and coming from people from all around. And so this prompted me to ask the question of what stories are being told and what stories are not being told that can be able to come from the archives. And so in this, I saw that there was a collection of a lot of records that had a lot of names and dates and places, but are difficult to access due to their fragile state. And so one way that I decided to utilize the information contained in these records was to collaborate with the larger research community with relationship to James Madison University and Eastern Mennonite University and Virginia Tech and other collections. And so the collection in this Rocktown History, if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide, I came across a large collection of curious songbooks. And what made these songbooks different from regular songbooks is the notation. So normally they are an elliptical shape, but these here, as you can be able to see on that chart, which is the same chart behind me, is they're in triangles, rectangles, and diamonds. And I was very intrigued by this, and in all of the songbooks which we had in our collection here. And so that made me want to do some more research into the history behind this kind of shape note music. And I discovered that through singing throughout the years, there was the first written note of the words was down in written. They were trying to figure out the rhythm, the beat, and the tone of these music. And so the earliest known forms of music date to about 1400 BCE in what is now Iraq. And around 1000 CE, there was an Italian monk named Guido of Arezzo who developed a system to teach singing using 6 syllables, which were ut, re, mi, fa, sol, and la. And so jumping forward later in England in the 1800s, a woman named Sarah Anna Glover refined that ancient process and created the modern, what we know of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti scale. which many are familiar with in The Sound of Music. And so if you want to go ahead and hit the next slide. The 19th century then became a time of experimentation with these notes and music theory and education. So in England and France and Ottoman Syria, China, India, and the United States, musicians modified earlier methods and printed instruction manuals for learning how to read printed music in new ways, such as Braille and using hand signals that went along with each of those do, re, and mi. And so some of these new systems prevailed and others did not. And so promoting these new methods required business acumen and diversification. And so starting in the early 1800s, Rockingham County became a hotspot for the promotion of musical notation, which used these character notes, as they were called, or shape notes, in lieu of the traditional round notes, which are more familiar with everyone. And so the use of characters to represent these notes around 1790 with 4 shapes, the triangle, oval, square, and diamond. And New England, William Little and William Smith published the first shape note system in the Easy Educator in 1801. And just 15 years later, in 1816, here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, 2 printers published the first shape note songbooks in the South, both based on 4 characters or 4 shapes. And those were Ananias Davison, and he published the Kentucky Harmony, as is shown on the screen. And his printing shop was located here in Harrisonburg, and he also had one in Grottos, which is a community nearby. In the other corner of Rockingham County, Joseph Funk began publishing shape note music for the local German population. And Funk went on to establish a printing business with these 4 characters. And now the city is named Singer's Glen in honor of his family. And so, and just 2 generations later, the Ruebush-Kieffer Company carried on Joseph Funk's business and expanded to Dayton, where we are right now. And Ephraim Ruebush and Aldine Kieffer used many of Funk's marketing methods to reach into the United States and Canada. Next slide, please. So one of the advertising documents that Joseph Funk used to promote his first book, which was called A Generally Useful Choral Music, which I found while I was doing research over at Eastern Mennonite University, which is about 15 minutes from this location. And historians thought that that advertisement was lost up until this point. And while I was doing research, I found it in the back of one of the ledger books that I was researching. And so now this is going to be part of the collection, which I have added, which will be available at a later date. And so after the Ananias Davison and Joseph Funk published their songbooks, as many as 29 other people published similar books in the shape notes throughout the southern United States before the Civil War. And so it was a phenomenon that was happening throughout not only the Shenandoah Valley, but throughout the southern half of the United States and up in the north as well. And the next slide, please. So that is a photo of the print shop in Singer's Glen. And by 1832, Joseph Funk was producing the genuine church music in English. He had changed from German over to English. And 15 years later, he published the Harmonia Sacra, which is a songbook which is still being sung through today. And Joseph Funk began a private music school in Singer's Glen, and teachers who trained under his instruction continued the English tradition of itinerant singing schools, which supported Funk's publishing. And as they traveled, primarily in the South, teachers distributed thousands of copies of his Harmonia Sacra throughout North America. And this print shop was only 18 by 20 feet of frame. And inside, they added a small room onto the loom house for a bindery. So in these two modest rooms, an estimated 200,000 books were printed prior to 1876, if you can imagine that. And about 80,000 of these were hymn books. And so just from that humble beginnings, the shape notes spread throughout the United States and Canada. And next slide, please. Funk also started the first musical periodical in the South, called the Southern Musical Advocate and Singer's Friend. And archived ledgers of these subscriptions indicate readership extended from 6 to 11 states between 1857 and 1867. Virginia represented about 76% of the mailing list in the earlier year, and by 1867, the increase in readership north, south, and west had grown so that the Virginias represented only 34% of the mailing addresses. Next slide, please. My goal was to make these ledgers more accessible to the public, but not just to digitize them, but to glean the information contained in them and to see how that information could be used for future research possibilities. As you can see here, for example, the names of Reverend T.D. Bell down to Miss Sally N. Mock has been transferred from the original text into the spreadsheet. So from this one ledger book alone, there were over 2,000 names of subscribers living in 21 states in a time period ranging from 1859 to 1867. And metadata from this ledger book yielded information ranging from titles such as Reverend, Professor, Doctor, Captain, Colonel, or Esquire, and showed the list of names, both men and women, who subscribed to the Shape Note Music periodical during this time period. Next slide, please. Once I completed the spreadsheet data, I completed a pie chart to show the statistics of some of the information which I gleaned from the register. And one of the things throughout the process was to remember that these were not just numbers, but that they represented actual individuals who were members of their communities, and that in each respective locality. And what I found was that there was both local and national community, which shared the culture and traditions surrounding the shape note music notation, whether the people lived in the east, north, south, or west. Next slide, please. During this time period, the Civil War stopped production in the print shop, and the Shenandoah Valley and surrounding area suffered major devastation from the effects of the Civil War. So, in addition to the Civil War, Joseph Funk died on December 24th, 1862, and which further stopped the printing at Joseph Funk's company. After his death, Ruebush and Kieffer, his grandsons and grandson-in-law, took over Funk's business and moved the fast-growing operations to Dayton in 1878 and expanded their Melodious marketing well beyond Rockingham County. Next slide, please. As the century progressed, the 4-shape notes, which I mentioned earlier, fell out of popularity, and the new 7-note systems were developed. Jesse Bowman Aiken was the first to have this new system published in 1846. Joseph Funk created his own 7-note system for use in the Harmonia Sacra, published in 1851. Next slide, please. Ruebush and Kieffer were both defenders of shape notes system, and they intended to reach 1 million singers to ensure the funk system would become the more prominent method of vocal musical instruction. And Jesse B. Aiken was, as you can see in the letter there, they had to make an agreement about the royalties on hymn books and permission to use his character note system. Next slide, please. So what we have here is testimonials, which are written into the Musical Million magazine, which was the predecessor of the Southern Musical Advocate, which Joseph Funk produced. And Ruebush-Kieffer took over and made their own magazine and promoted their business through selling organs that they could be able to then share with their business. And so this testimonial here is given by R.A. Kaler on January 23rd, 1882. And he said, enclosed, you'll find an order for 3 copies of your organ instructor and 3 copies of the Million for 1 year. This order results from 3 sales that I have just made of E.P. Carpenter's celebrated cabinet organs. I've had one of his instruments, number 202, on trial for 10 days. It's elegant in style and finish, beautiful, sweet, and pure in tone. While we go along, we will not forget to recommend your organ instructor and speak a good word for the Million. You are doing nobly for the cause of music. Your influence is widening in Texas. And judging from the fact that many singing societies have now laid their round note books on the shelf and are using your shape note books, it is said experience teaches. Let me give the readers of the Musical Million one instance of a little experience with low notations. In the year 1880, I taught a class in Kentucky Town. About half of the class had the shape note books and the other half had round notes. I never mentioned or explained the shape notes during my lessons, but they explained themselves. At the close of the school, my observation was that those using the shape notes far excelled those using round notes in reading music at sight and could read the round notes as well as others, which convinced me that the common sense system is the best for the people. Next slide, please. And this is an advertisement for one of the organs that the Ruebush-Kieffer Company sold, and some of the incentives which they gave to people to be able to promote their company was, besides the organ, ladies' fine gold watch, illustrated family Bibles, $20 worth of music books, or a violin, guitar, or clarinet worth $15. And these were just a few of the incentives that they gave to encourage subscribers to join with the Musical Million shape notes. And next slide, please. And so in 1878, they established and edited in 1870 the Musical Million and Fireside Friend, which was a journal of music, poetry, and chaste home literature. And other musical magazines of the times were being published in New York, and Boston, and Chicago, and Philadelphia. Like Funk's Musical Advocate, the Musical Million became a news source for shape note community throughout the United States, and a savvy marketing tool for the Ruebush-Kieffer Company. While subscribers were offered these many general articles on vocal techniques, musician profiles, and printed songs for the immediate addition to their repertoires, the promotion of Ruebush-Kieffer's shape note system is undeniable. Within the journal's pages, editorials, news from singing professors, and letters from subscribers, and testimonials. By locating here in Dayton, the Ruebush-Kieffer Company anticipated easier transportation for their published materials via the planned railroad. They had to wait, though, until 1895 to recognize that benefit. In the meantime, Dayton offered proximity to Shenandoah Seminary, which later became Shenandoah University, and personal and professional relationships with Shenandoah would enhance the output of their publishing house. And there were also assistant editors to the Musical Million in 1892, listed as J.H. Ruebush and J.H. Hall. James Hott Ruebush was Ephraim Ruebush's son. And when the Ruebush-Kieffer Company moved to Dayton, James Hott was 14 years old. He studied music at the Shenandoah Seminary in Ohio and at the National Conservatory in New York. Returning as a member of the staff of what was then the Shenandoah Institute, J.H. Ruebush heavily influenced the growth of the school's strong music tradition and later became president of the institution. Next slide, please. So around the turn of the 20th century, Aldine Kieffer broke off from the main company and formed his own company with his son. He also mentioned that in one of the letters, he wanted to create another printing press back in Singer's Glen. These documents are from Bridgewater College and help to complete the story of the picture here. And in addition to this, Aldine Kieffer also created his own music journal called Our Musical Advocate and Fireside Friend, which was separate from the Musical Million, which had been going on with the Ruebush-Kieffer Company. And so following this, other musical companies sprung up, which followed the similar marketing techniques which Joseph Funk and Sons used and the Ruebush-Kieffer Company used. And these companies were the A.J. Showalter Company, the Vaughn Company, and the Stamps Baxter Company. They each created their own musical journals, which were similar to the Musical Million Journal. And after learning the tricks of the trade here in Dayton, A.J. Showalter was sent to make his own office down in Dalton, Georgia, but instead created his own company, the Showalter Music Company down there. And next slide, please. These are the headstones for Aldine Kieffer and Ephraim Ruebush, which are located in the cemetery right across the street from this building. And with this, the company transitioned into new hands, and it is now part of the museum here. We have their printing press, which they use, and is going to be part of our museum exhibit here. Next slide, please. So these documents also are research opportunities for those who come to research here at Rocktown History and who do family history. And through their better access to these records, patrons coming into Rocktown History Research Library can now search through these names contained in the ledgers to not only find their ancestors, but to see historical trends of travel and immigration patterns, which add to the value and the depth of their research and general knowledge, which they can then share with their family and the community. Students and teachers also can use this information for research projects, and there are also endless possibilities how future research can be able to be combined with census data to determine who the subscribers were in each community and denomination of religion that they belong to. So this process, which I've done, can be replicated with items in communities throughout the United States who have similar ledgers to be able to find the social, religious, cultural, economic, political, or other activities. And one of the things I found while researching in this collection was that Rocktown History's archives only contained a portion of the business records which are part of the Joseph Funk Company, as well and the Ruebush-Kieffer Company, and some of which we only have a digital copy of, but have also been located in other archives as well. And that was one of the things which I came across as I was doing research, is that there were these records contained throughout the Shenandoah Valley at various universities. And so I moved to the next slide, please. Worked with the James Madison University Library to compile and these records into one site where they can be able to be researched and be able to use this Omeka website, which is called Histories Along the Blue Ridge, to be able to allow these records to be brought back together in an online archive in one space after being separated for so many years, and allows for further expansion in the future. I was only able to hit the tip of the iceberg with this collection. There are so many contained at other institutions, such as the American Antiquarian Society, which holds over 800 pages of Joseph Funk's original handwritten letters. And so with the help of JMU Library, there's also going to be a companion website which goes along, linked to the Rocktown History. And so my project had three parts: the museum exhibit, the Omeka site, and a website. And the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia here is so instrumental in the promotion of shape notes and the traditions associated with them. These shape note traditions from the people in the Shenandoah Valley spread over time throughout North America, from the people in the Shenandoah Valley, all throughout the United States and Canada during the 19th century and into the 20th. Companies such as the Ruebush-Kieffer Company put their marketing skills to work by using shape note method as a way to sell and distribute their products and to get more people interested in using them, thus establishing a secure way to earn an income. Shape notes eventually fell out of popularity for the majority in the 1930s, but thanks to these traditions established around, they stayed in isolated pockets, mainly throughout the southern United States. And the 21st century has brought a rebirth of the shape note singing, with singing groups now listed again throughout the United States and the Shenandoah Valley, with both the 4 shape note method and the 7 shape note method. And that is my presentation for tonight. Thank you very much. And I will open it up to questions. Thank you.
So what did cause the shape note music to fall out of favor in the 1930s?
So there was the introduction of new methods of entertainment, such as the radio, and that was a form of the younger generation did not necessarily continue the aspects that had gone forth in the previous generations with that. So a part of it was the new technology and developments which added to that. And yeah. Yeah, was there a question? Yeah.
Did you make a determination yourself, draw your own conclusion about how useful shape notes were in learning music compared to the normal system?
Oh, yes. So the question is, did I make a determination on the usefulness of shape notes over round notes? And my conclusion was that it depends. Because those, it's similar to cursive handwriting and print handwriting. And if it is taught at a young age, those who grow up singing it often are able to then continue to sing with shape notes far into their future versus, and those who try to learn shape notes later on have a difficult way of learning to read it because they are more familiar with the round notes. There was a study done in school children in California in the 1980s, I believe it was, where they surveyed, they took two separate groups of children and taught one shape notes and the other round notes, and found that those who were taught shape notes learned how to read music faster than those who were taught shape or round notes. Go ahead.
Are there any contemporary groups that you know of that are singing shape note today?
Oh, yes. There are many groups. There is one here locally, which I have attended some of their sings. And there is also a group up in the northern Shenandoah Valley that does the 4-shape note method. And there is on the website, it's called fossolaw.org, I believe, where you can be able to search where the singings are throughout the United States. There's also even a group in Japan that I found that sings shape notes. So it's spread all the way there. Go ahead.
Every month, there's a harmonious sacred sing in this area, usually at one of the Mennonite churches here. This coming Sunday evening at 6:30 at Driscoll's Mennonite Church, there's a harmonious sacred sing, for instance. Driscoll's Mennonite Church is just north of Harrisonburg. You can go there and sing shape notes. And they'll have extra books there if you don't have a harmonious sacred book. And they have boxes of books there that you can sing out of. But there's, in the old order Mennonite community and in the variety of Mennonite churches out there, it's still used and sung. Not as a word, not in worship, I'm going to word that happening, not in worship services, but even on a Sunday evening, they're used to it. At least once a month. Yeah.
I would say it's very common to have shape notes among all the Mennonites and most of the Mennonites and old orders. We grew up, that's what I grew up knowing, and you can teach, I've taught music and I've taught both. And you can teach a child so much faster to read music quickly with the shape notes. I've had experience and I would testify to that.
Thank you. Yes.
Just repeat what she said.
Yes. So from a comment from the community here is that what has been said is true, that teaching shape notes to children at a young age is much more advantageous than round notes, if I interpret correctly. Yes.
And the shapes are the signs that go with the notes. I didn't learn as a child, but it's in our school now and taught, like we teach the shapes. We also teach lines and spaces, but what do you call it, the symbols of hand
Oh,
motions
yes,
are taught like us, because in some kids' minds, that helps them connect, which it helps them in their brain to remember. It's very effective.
yes.
Strictly for vocal music?
So we have found, the question is, were shape notes used?
Apparently they can hear you fine.
Oh.
Good job, everybody.
Well, thank you. No, they were used in organ instruction manuals as well as piano instruction manuals, so not strictly for singing.
I would just say that the shape notes are advantageous in simple music that doesn't change keys, right? The complicated classical music that changes keys, then it gets mixed up because you've changed your key structure. So that's where round notes are better than shape notes in classical music, where you have sonatas and so forth that change keys.
Correct.
You can do it in shape music, you just have to know what to jump to.
Yes. Go ahead.
The thing that puzzles me is how you would work with 4 notes when you have a 7-note scale. How did that work?
Yeah, so that's one reason why they transitioned from the 4-note method to the 7-note method with the shapes, because it was confusing. So they had the method included 4 shapes, but then it would repeat upon itself. So there was still the 7, and I'm not a musician, so I can't technically describe it, but Joseph Funk and others, Aiken, who I mentioned, saw that in the 1840s and decided, hey, we need to create more shapes to match each of the different sounds. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but.
So online, there's a comment that that repeats what you said. Up until the last few decades, the Mennonite Publishing House published both round notes and shape notes editions of their hymnals. So they have lasted a long time. One question is about Aldine Kieffer's organ factory. Did he have his factory in Dayton as well as his residence? So I'm guessing that the residence refers to Singer's Glen. I'm not sure.
Yes, so I kind of briefly mentioned the organ factory, which was located here in Dayton, about, I'd say 3 or 4 blocks away from us here. But the organ company did not last very long. It lasted for about 10 years. Unfortunately, it burned down and was not rebuilt afterwards. And so the incentive of giving organs then there did not continue after that. But we do have one of those organs, which was built in Dayton, on display here at the museum. Are there any other? Go ahead.
The headstones for Joseph Funk and Ananias Davidson, are they in Singer's Glen?
No.
The
Ananias Davidson's at Cross Keys
yes,
Cemetery.
yes, the Ananias Davison is over in Cross Keys, and Joseph Funk's is over in Singer's Glen. So 2 kind of opposite sides of the area here. Go ahead.
Are there any ancestors related to Ruebush or Aiken or Funk living right now here in the community?
Descendants, yes, there are. And they have been very helpful with my research here, as I've been working with the community to be able to get information and to be able to share this with the community. Go ahead.
When do you hope your master's thesis will be finished?
I'll be graduating on the 12th, And so everything will be completed by then. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Very presentation and engaging, and I was thinking just the connection here of sort of, the singing industry, if you will, as you touched a little bit about the connection with Shenandoah, seminary, which became a conservatory, and then ultimately university. Could you speak a little bit more towards that, on how Ruebush-Keiffer kind of fit in with that?
Yeah, definitely. So there was the Shenandoah Institute, which was here, and the I believe it was the United Brethren Church, which helped to institute that originally here. And over time, it kept expanding and growing larger with was changed names over time, but it always included music and teaching music as part of the curriculum. And so the Ruebushes and the Kieffers and others, the Halls, were all influential teachers and professors there at the college. And over time, it outgrew Dayton, and they then moved up to Winchester, and are still very connected with music at the heart of their institution. And so there was that, and we have a beautiful display as well in our museum that discusses that in greater detail. We have time for.
Person asked if these were folding organs. And I'm trying to type that when we slide it, it does not collapse. It is very heavy. I do not believe it folds.
No, there was a full-size organs. Yes.
For a parlor.
Yes.
Maybe he heard me and now I don't have to finish typing.
Well, thank you all so much for your attention and for coming tonight to hear my presentation.
Thank you, Tyler. Let's see if I can get organized here so I can close out the webinar. And it's the webinar and we'll just take a moment. All right, thank you everybody who joined us this evening. I so appreciate you choosing to find time in your schedule to discover more local history. If you appreciated the program, I invite you to like, follow, and share the Rocktown History Facebook and Instagram accounts, where you will find additional history news and notes. We are updating our website, but generally we try to keep abreast of upcoming events under the News and Events tab. Next month, we will be jumping forward about 100 years as we welcome Bob Driver, who will talk about the hip Harrisonburg music scene, primarily at the Elbow Room in the 1970s. Ooh, rumors in the room. Okay, I'll expect to see you all next month. We've always been pleased to offer free Third Thursday talks and curator talks. Please help us keep them free by joining or donating under the Connect tab on rocktownhistory.org. And at the bottom of the website, you can also sign up for our e-blast for occasional inbox reminders and stories. And lastly, thank you for joining the conversation. Stay curious and support your local history. Again, thank you and good night.